Hi, welcome back to another episode of SEO On-Air. I'm your host, Aaron, and today we have Seth Price, CEO and founder of BluShark Digital. Today we talk about who he was before he started his company, how things have changed over the years, and where does he see the potential of AI going. I hope you enjoyed this episode. So who exactly is Seth Price, and who were you before BluShark?
Sure. Thank you so much for having me, Aaron. This is great to be here. I was a kid who grew up in New York City and had an entrepreneurial bent, but used New York City as my playground. I sort of, as a kid, would help newspaper distribution for political campaigns within New York City, where there are huge apartment buildings, and they would want to get to people, and I'd have my buddies and friends, kids, distribute newspapers, and they would pay me like $2,000 for the project, and I'd hire a bunch of kids for $3 an hour, and had a lot of fun and served them pizza. Everybody had a great time, and they got their word out, and that was sort of the beginning of the entrepreneurial journey. Graduated UPenn in the early 90s when there wasn't a ton of opportunity, and ended up going to law school, which was a safe place to sort of, the go-go 80s were gone, and safe place to hide for 3 years. I knew I didn't want to practice long-term, but seemed like a good checkbox. My dad is a lawyer. He practices, still practicing at 89, but a lot of his buddies went on to run movie studios, import European cars for Europe, U.S. tourists out of Spain, like all sorts of interesting stuff. So I, again, graduated law school in 95. The economy wasn't that much better, and ended up doing a few years of corporate law at a law firm, Swidler, that doesn't exist anymore, that's been acquired after a couple acquisitions by Morgan Lewis. Right. I was never a particularly good associate, and loved the business that my clients were in and doing the stock option plans for them. I always wanted to be the client, not the lawyer. So a number of years later, when my buddy from college and law school, Dave Benowitz, wanted to start a firm, I really didn't, but I said, okay, let's divide and conquer. You do the lawyering and I'll do the business. And right. Was the fiddling around with digital. I sort of wet my beak on digital during the first .com bubble, and really enjoyed the digital marketing component. And we basically used that know-how to scale our own firm. It's now 44 lawyers across 4 states, if you include DC as a state, which it really isn't. And then we also went out, and about 8-9 years ago, I took my in-house team from Price Benowitz and spun that into what's today BluShark Digital, that services over 250 law firms nationwide for their website, SEO, and PPC needs.
Right. I mean, like, that's pretty much like the entire history of, I think, before the BluShark kind of started off. But one kind of question that I have that might lead up to a lot more questions is, what are some things to keep in mind when you're growing an agency from 2 to 40 plus?
We've learned a ton of lessons over the years, and systems really important, company culture, I think, really important. And it's one thing to say I can SEO a website, or even 2, 3, or 10, but to do at scale is not for the faint of heart. And that things take on extra complications when you're trying to do this at scale, at high quality, for a large number of people.
And when it comes to, let's say, hiring the right person for the right job, do you feel like that's something that you need to be really strict about? Or do you feel like sometimes a new person can just learn the ways and kind of become the right person?
It's tough. I mean, like, finding people that really know what they're doing. There are a lot of people with things on their resume, but as you interview, it's really tough to find great talent. We have very proud of the fact that we put together a fellowship program where we have up to 15 university, either undergrads, some graduate students, some recent grads, who do rotations for either a semester or for the summer, and that they get to rotate through different departments. And then over time, some people stay with us for 2, 3 sessions, that over time that you really get to know somebody. So you figure out what they're capable of, you can see what they're good at. And that training from the ground up has been our secret sauce, that we've been able to build a talent pool, much like Big Law does summer associate programs. I find that very often when you find people that quote unquote know an area, it's tough. It's a needle in the haystack, finding somebody who really knows what they're talking about, rather than just enough to get through an interview.
I feel like there's a lot of people who can actually just fluff their way through and then they can get by to the interview. And then once you actually have a chat with them, they're just completely fake or they...
Right? Look, that's why it's not just an interview, right? You can even fake an interview to a certain extent, but we do a lot of role playing in certain positions where we're asking questions. How do they react? As I've evolved both at Price by Notes and at BluShark, I've done it. I hear a lot out there that we're not hiring for skills, we're hiring for traits. And that's not completely true, right? Because you need someone who does PPC. Starting from the ground up is going to be a lot harder than if somebody already is familiar with the space and done things. But it cuts two ways, because if they already have bad habits and don't do things the way you want it, then it's harder. So the more you have systems in place, the more you can hire bright people to follow those and then help evolve them for you. I think that agencies can get in trouble when they hire somebody who's going to be that silver bullet and solve everything for them, because the odds of them substantially knowing it at that level. We all know people that come in, they could have a great interview. They could be a honeymoon period for the first little bit. What is that? What else is there? How much depth is there? And that's a real issue.
Yeah, and I think that what you guys do with the courses and the programs to kind of help them learn while they're at the job is another way to kind of just keep people retained in the company. Because you're not only giving them a lifeline, you're also kind of helping them educate and become better at what they do. But these aren't maybe things that you kind of started off with knowing back in 95 or even 96. These are kind of traits and qualities that you learned over the years. So as to someone who, let's say, wants to kind of become someone like you, what are, let's say, 5 things that you should keep in mind when starting a company or starting an agency?
I mean, look, when you start, you take what you can get, right? You don't have a reputation of a brand. You can still interview, but you don't know what you don't know. There's a lot to get done, and that very often you need somebody who's more multifaceted when you start, because you don't have somebody at every seat. I think that creating an org chart that shows what you need, even though you might be in 4 or 5 of the spots when you start, and slowly fill, assuming you want to scale, that as you have the revenue to justify it, bring people in. That's really helpful. I think figuring out the red flags. I mean, we had people, again, we were more in office pre-COVID, but early days of the agency, we had guys trading Adderall in the office, and we had all sorts of weird things happen. And that as you grow and have some gravitas, you're able to acquire talent, I think, at a higher level. One thing is, until you have that, where people are coming to you because they've heard of you. Like, I now have friends calling me saying, "Can you get my kid into the fellowship program?" We're at that point now, which is, like, how do you even know about this? But I think that what is interesting is, if you can find that, being a guest lecturer at a local university, befriending the professors there, finding ways to get talent, I think is really, really important. And then not overpaying for resume talent. Not that people couldn't have amazing experience and you want it, but part of the reason I started the agency is I didn't see people doing things the way I'd want them to do it. And that while I'm sure on a national search, you can find some people at a great agency doing stuff, there are a lot of crappy agencies out. There's no shortage, no barrier to entry. Thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of agencies, even large ones where I don't respect the work they do. And you find people, they're, very often like, I don't really like I don't like the work product they're putting out. I don't want to hire somebody to bring that within my place. And so it's tough because they know what they're doing. They could talk about it really well, but it's not the widget you want to deliver for your clients.
Right. I think I should have maybe interrupted a little bit earlier, but I meant more of what are the qualities a leader should have when starting off a company?
Oh, I mean, look, that's the cycle that I've come. When I started, it was like you got nothing. So like, it's drive, it's yelling, it's this, it's that. With time, it's following your chain of command. It's creating the company culture that people want to work for. It's making sure that you give people a great place to build and grow. I think one of the things that I've seen our company and others struggle with is the balance between, they're no good and pushing on, versus having the right systems in place to make people successful, making sure that the better you do screening on the way in, the less problematic you may have once people are there, and figuring out if you, as a leader, hire for great skill sets as far as actually, let me strike that. If you hire for people's DNA, who they are at their core, and are they going to work well with others, and can they build and grow and adapt? Something that I saw over the years, both at BluShark and at Price Benowitz, is you hire somebody and the company or the role morphed and you need to do something else. Oh, that wasn't what I was hired for. The more you can get away from that, and the more you can get to people that see a big picture and buy into it, and as a leader put that out there, the more that when things do change, you will have the ability and flexibility to work with them and build something bigger rather than just flushing them out because that job description changed.
I feel like I was in that boat quite a while back. Like at my first job, I was the kind of person to tell my managers, hey, listen, you didn't hire me to do this, so don't expect me to do that. And over the years, I kind of realized that doing these extra things might help my own career in a different way. So as, let's say, a leader from a leader point of view, what are some ways to kind of motivate employees so that they can actually get out of ruts and, perform their best?
I think part of it's what you just said. It's sort of like helping people see that. And you can't just tell them, hey, I think when you're hiring somebody, getting them to buy into the vision, the leadership, etc., which will make it less likely you're going to get those reactions. Again, we've all been there. And that if you get somebody who is mission driven, then the fact that something tweaks in order to get you further on that mission, I think is more likely to happen than I'm there, because you're not going to be able to compete with somebody else. There's always somebody paying $2 an hour more. There's always going to be somebody with slightly better food in the break room, whatever that is, or more flexibility, whatever. And so that the way that I think that by getting people that really bond with the organization, and I think that's one of the things that, look, it's been a prickly spot, which is, what do you do when somebody's not right? You look at the great business leaders, like a Jack Welch, they talk about calling the bottom 10% every year. Problem is, some of those people can be very popular, and you could have cultural issues if you bring somebody who's a disaster work-wise,
Right.
Who's very popular. And I think that's one of those things that you struggle with. And one of my mentors in the legal side, great consultant named Bill Biggs, he creates a chart, and he just showed it the other day, where it had, and also John Knockhazel from Fireproof and Mike Morris Law Firm, they talk about a continuum of competency and culture. And while you don't want somebody who's just non-competent, if they culturally fit in, there are many things you could do and build and work with. And again, there's a floor. If you're below that, you can't do it at all. But the issue that I think that a lot of people have when they're starting out, and I'm sure you've seen this, is that you get somebody who is an amazing force, and they can do this, they can do that, but they're culturally rubbing people the wrong way. They're, berating people. And so that's one of the most painful lessons, life moments, is when you realize those super people that can do incredible stuff and may get you through those early years when you need to plug a lot of holes and do a lot of things, that's not a sustainable way to build and grow, and that you do need people rowing together. It can be frustrating as an entrepreneur because those people can be extreme catalysts and do some amazing things, but they can also be pretty destructive on your firm's ability to build and grow long term.
So can we take a little bit a turn into BluShark Digital? Kind of understood how it started off, but I want to know what kind of makes BluShark Digital a lot different from other agencies.
One of the things I think, the single greatest thing we have going for us is our people. We have really amazing teams that buy in, that do these things. As I said, anybody can do this, but to do this at scale, we invested in U.S. labor that a lot of people have not. There's benefits. Not that we don't have an international team as part of it, but that we really have, valued education, as well as, buy into our mission, trust the process, and that what we do is focus on fundamentals. And it's tough because, as you know, in this space, there are a lot of shortcuts that can be taken. There's a lot of spam that can be used. And every few years, people forget about it. But if you live through the manual actions of a decade ago, you realize that you take too many shortcuts. At some point, you'll pay the piper. And that, my goal is to treat our clients the way, if they had full transparency into what was being done, that we are behaving the way they would want to be. We push and take risks and disclose those, but that we are protecting our clients very often from themselves. Just as a lawyer, you're protecting your client from themselves, educating them what the options are, and then strategically implementing the best practices to get the best possible results with the resources provided.
I was going to say, you don't have to really mention that to me, because we kind of know that a lot of US agencies outsource to other people, mainly us as well. But to have like a homegrown labor department itself is a lot more easier, because you don't have to really interact online to have a project worked, and you can have everything done in your own backyard technically.
Right. And there's nothing wrong with pieces that are done around the globe. Like with COVID, we opened our doors. We have people around the country, around the world doing different tasks. But there are, if you think that a $2 non-educated person out of the Philippines, $2 an hour person, and there's nothing wrong, they're great people, but they're not performing at the same level and doing the same pieces, you're not going to, there are going to be issues. There's going to be cringe moments or things that are going to be done wrong. And so it's a balance. You want to do things as cost effectively as possible, while at the same time, you want to be able to provide a product that you're really proud of.
Right. You don't want to cut corners so much that you actually lose the foundation of your actual house. You want to just make sure that you're still cost effective and you can keep the foundation.
Right. And it's a balance, right? If you go too far, you're going to go in one direction. If you go the other direction, it's going to be harder to get the ROI that you need for your clients. And so you're always sort of internally weighing that.
Right. And I think somewhere in between is where we can maybe throw in a little bit of artificial intelligence. I feel like that's another topic that we can talk about for a long time, but I'll try to keep it a bit simple. AI, I think, kind of got its big ramp up last year itself, and it's been going on ever since. What are your thoughts on it from then, and what do you think might happen in a couple of months?
Well, look, the genie's out of the bottle. It's there. And we're integrating it across our company in many different ways. And I think there are some that we are still internally struggling with. The question is, AI is content is sort of like the sort of brass ring. And people say, oh, ChatGPT, I'm just going to put that in. That seems to be, for a bunch of reasons, not a great way to be going. However, at the same time, I would say that you are, if you bury your head in the sand and don't do anything, it's a problem. So I want to be able to bring the advantages and the efficiencies and best practices of AI and continue to build and grow with it. At the same time, this isn't about just shutting down your content department and writing ChatGPT. Look, from a business point of view, Google didn't invest early and doesn't own ChatGPT. They can detect what is ChatGPT. They don't want to incentivize that success. They don't want to incentivize bad results. And it's tough because, but at the same time, my gut is that AI, whether it's figuring out, outlining what you need to do, what other people have that you don't have, trying to make sure that you have these things, if you can use it to improve and build and grow, great. But to use this as a shortcut, as you sort of mentioned before, it's that you're going to get burnt. But if you use it as a tool, as a co-pilot, just like people, using labor from around the world, all of these things, if done strategically and with purpose, I think there's some great advantages that can be had.
I've done around maybe, I think, 70 odd episodes of this podcast. And I think every single time they've said the exact same thing, which is if you're going to use ChatGPT as a copy paste tool for your content, you're going to get burnt. But if you're going to use it as a research kind of thing to help you create that content or help you create a strategy or an outline, then you're going to do just fine.
Well, I got to tell you, on two things, on a LinkedIn post and even on a Facebook post, I use, and in both instances, it made it much better than what I wrote myself. But it wasn't like I just said, hey, do it from scratch. But there are places where there are places where the words don't matter as much and you're checking boxes. I'll take you back to law school. In law school, I remember my professor would grade us. He would read your essays in class. They're in blue books, or even online. I'm that old. And people would write it, and he would literally just circle or check when you used a term in the paragraph to show that you've answered the question. And from that point of view, ChatGPT could do those things, right? I mean, it can sort of play that word game. The question is, can we make sure that we balance a good user experience? And like on the legal side, there are all these awful things where somebody just takes a ChatGPT nonsensical answer and files it in court, yeah, you'll be in trouble. But you do that if you had an associate or at an agency. If you allow somebody, whether domestic or international, from the U.S. point of view, to do work, if there are no checks and balances, and they give you crap and you publish it, it's going to be bad. So it's having those checks and balances in place. I think you don't want to be in the point where you can't ever make a mistake. At the same time, if knowing that as an agency, if you make too many mistakes, you're going to lose the client.
Besides ChatGPT, are there any other tools that you would like to maybe recommend other people to check out?
I mean, look, there are so many that we use. I'll give you an example right now, just for like recruiting. The fact that you can go through resumes at scale and find potential hires. That was one that I would argue we've leveraged really well, shockingly so. I was shocked that would be there. And so to me, I am much, I love the fact that, like, from an editing point of view, from trying to make things better, and from a competitive analysis point of view, the tools that we've used at ChatGPT, some homegrown and some off the shelf, have really been a game changer.
Are there any, let's say, custom AI tools that you've made at BluShark, or?
I mean, we're constantly tinkering with those, and I think the content department is the one that is, I'm always struggling with. I'll give you, from software in general, I don't like to reinvent the wheel. Like, somebody says, "Oh, I'm not going to use, Salesforce. I'm building my own." Like, there are things out there, that, like, why are you reinventing? And I think that more and more people are sort of coming to that conclusion. That said, they got to start somewhere, and especially now, there are things. If things don't exist that you need, it's kind of cool to be able to, to leverage existing technologies to build what it is that you would want. But in general, I'm not a software guy, meaning I don't want to be in the software business. And so I'd rather have my guys, generally leverage what else is out there. But when there are things, for example, competitive analysis, and there's not a true tool that, we play in the WordPress environment, if there are tools out there that could scrape and tell you who what content your three biggest competitors have and what they're missing, and try to help you really bridge the gap to give a great user experience on your website. Those are the things that I'm like, if it doesn't exist out there, I'm pushing my team to develop them.
Right. Are there anything else in store for BluShark besides, let's say, some AI implementation? Do you have any other, let's say, services that you might start up?
We're always looking, whether it's different service areas. We have a medical division for elective medicine, BluShark Digital, that we launched, and it's been eye-opening, because I thought, hey, we do legal, medical's nothing. But we realized is the med people are way, way, way more concerned with the aesthetic look of the site, particularly the plastics area, med spa area, than the lawyers are like, just make sure I show up on the first page, make sure the words are okay. They get very upset the words aren't right. Whereas here, if a photo isn't cropped properly or things like that, they live and die based on people's perception of of what the look and feel is. And so that has been interesting. I saw this to a certain extent starting my law firm, where the people who do plaintiffs work, where somebody's injured and they're not getting any money up front from somebody, but they make their money on a contingency. It's a very, very different world than the fee for service, where somebody's been arrested or is getting divorced or needs a will, where you're paying cash up front. It's two different mentalities. And I think to a certain extent, as you go into different service areas, even within legal, the people that do mass tort lead generation, or mass tort dockets, these guys have a very, very different risk calculus than the people who are doing family or trust and estates, where it's these guys are much more risk averse, and figuring out how you can play ball with these guys and work with them in a manner that meets them where they're at.
I'm going to give a few, let's say, quick fire questions, and feel free to decline any of them if you want to. But what are, let's say, 3 qualities of a client that they show that you wouldn't want to work with them?
That you would not want to work with them. Well, I'll flip it to positive, but hopefully we can get the corollaries. But we need people that understand that it's a partnership. So the negative would be somebody says, "Here's my check, go perform for me." There are areas where that works, but SEO specifically doesn't work nearly as well. If somebody sees us as their outsourced arm, like we could do it ourselves, but here's talent, and have our people interact and get us the information and work back and forth, it works exponentially better. So you got that. I would say that the other red flag is somebody who doesn't understand what we're doing. It can be presented, and there's always a pulling tongue. Salespeople, business development people say, and people hear what they want them to hear. But if clients understand and buy in, SEO, for example, is not for the faint of heart. You need to build critical mass to get to the point. If you have some SEO done, and I use the analogy, it's like building a house. You need to get a foundation laid, you need to frame it out, drywall it. If you don't get through finishing it out, closing it in, and putting the finishes on, it doesn't do you any good. So if you're not in play for SEO, there's a good chance so that if 3 months later you built a foundation, you framed the house, and there's nothing else, that house isn't worth anything. And so that somebody who understands the time frame, the risk involved, and what's taken to get there. And so to me, you need a client that understands that, and somebody who, and the thing that I've seen, which sounds crazy, is in business, you'd love it. If you and I spoke and said, hey, Aaron, do you need our services? And you said, sure. And you signed right here. The odds of you being a client in 2 months is very, very low. People that sign immediately are the people that break immediately. They don't understand what you're doing. If you really understand what we're doing, it is not nothing. You need to think about it. You need to budget it. You need to know we're right, reflect on it. And so that if somebody is immediately, oh, great, let's do it right now. That same shiny object concept, they're going to be odds that we had one guy like that. He ended up like, he was, one day he came to me and said, like, it was some like retired Mexican wrestler that had a TV ad campaign. I'm going to go spend money with them. And it's like, if somebody's shiny object coming in, again, a lot of it comes down to dating. Somebody who like quickly, has a series of 2-week relationships. What are the odds that you're going to be their life partner?
Okay. What are, let's say, 3 signs that an agency will go the distance?
As the agency itself for somebody, or I think it's when you see somebody that has systems in place to allow that company to scale. Because if you are not prepared for scale and you sign on to an agency and then they take on other clients, that's going to be a problem. So you need to see, is this somebody who is going to be able to handle more business? And if not, just like a law firm or anything else, if you're a law firm and you have one associate and you bring in a ton more business, those clients aren't going to get a lot of love. So you need to know that this is a person who's going to build and grow and invest, rather than just say, thank you for your business, squeeze it, and then give a much lesser product.
Thank you so much for the chat, Seth. It's been great. You kind of maybe broke it down really quickly for me to kind of get to that point where you are today. So I hope our viewers and listeners also get the same kind of experience. Thank you so much. Thanks for watching that episode. I hope you enjoyed. For more videos like this, make sure you like and subscribe.